Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate that. And thank you for asking me to be here. It's exciting to be kicking off this Fine Arts Festival for this summer, and I appreciate all you guys being here for this session. I'm really excited. As Ryan said, I went to Gordon. I was a theater arts and music major, and that's sort of where I got my start in career development as well. I worked in the academic advising office there and just sort of served as like a peer mentor throughout my time there. And then when I went to grad school for musical theater, I also worked in the career center there and started, cultivating both my theater skills and my career development skills. And that's where I've sort of landed doing both, working as a professional actor and in advising. So I'm really excited to speak to you all today. I have a lot of information that I'm going to present in sort of a presentation format, and then we're going to take a look at things more specifically in templates to give you a better idea of exactly all the details I was giving you. So if it gets a little overwhelming, know that that part is coming. But of course, throughout the session, if you have any questions, you can either throw them into the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you feel more comfortable with. We'll also do a Q&A at the end, but you are welcome to ask a question at any time. And before I begin, I just want to, if you could throw in the chat or unmute yourself and just let me know what area of theater arts you're most interested in, if you know that, and then I can focus a little more on that throughout the session. I'm going to be addressing all different aspects, but if you want to throw that into the chat, that would be helpful. And yeah, so before as you throw that into the chat, I'm going to pull up my screen. I also want you guys to throw this into the chat. If you could tell me a word or a thought or feeling that comes up when you think about resumes or writing a resume. And as I pull up the presentation, you guys can throw that into the chat. That would be great. Awesome. So I have this pulled up. I can't see the chat anymore, but Ryan, could you, if anyone answered, could you read that off for me?
So we have Kiana is interested in drama therapy, acting, and directing.
Awesome.
Chris Ortiz, directing, acting, and arts admin.
Awesome.
And I can just throw out, I feel like a common conception of resumes is that they're boring, not a lot of room for creativity.
Yes.
Rebecca is performance and producing.
Right. Awesome. Great. No, that's very helpful. I think we're going to touch upon all those different areas as we go along today. And if you have questions specifically, we can, of course, address them. And yes, the overall consensus, as I assumed, is a little boring or scary or overwhelming. How do I even do this? Exactly. And that's why we're here today. We're here to sort of demystify a lot of the things around resumes and sort of put your worries to rest so that you have direction for how to go about sitting down and writing that resume and writing it effectively so that you're presenting yourself well for your next audition or your next job application. So welcome all, resume ready. So my sort of theme for this whole resume workshop is the fact that resumes are the story of your experience. So that's how we can get away from that sort of boring narrative or rhetoric around resumes, thinking of them as a story. You have a story to tell, and in this circumstance, it's a story of your professional experience. So the thing is, we all need them. We all need a resume at one point or another in our lives. And as I said, writing one can be a little scary, especially as creative people. It's not always how we're wired to think, very systematically, very structured. So I encourage you all as artists to shift your mindset, because what we do inherently is we are storytellers. We tell stories, and that's what we're used to. That's what we're comfortable with. So I challenge you all to think about yourselves as resume writers and as job seekers, to think of yourself also as storytellers through that process. In resumes and cover letters, we are telling the story of our experience in a compelling way that draws the reader in and makes them want to call us in for something. In auditions, of course, we're telling stories of our material that we're presenting, but also when we walk into the room, when we answer a question a casting director may have, or something along those lines. And in interviews, we're also telling stories. If we're getting situational or behavioral questions from them or having to talk about an experience, we have to craft a story and make it interesting and truthful to who you are in the moment. So all of those things require storytelling, and that's the foundation of what we do as artists. And I would argue the foundation of what we do as job seekers and resume writers. And as we all know, branding and marketing yourself is a huge thing, especially for our industry. And and resumes are a part of that. Resumes are a part of that brand. In fact, they're your first impression. It's the first thing people are going to see before you may even get called into the room. So you want to make sure it reflects who you are as a person and as an artist. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. And just relating this whole process of writing a resume down back to theater, I'm sure you've heard in your Gordon classes that we value process over product in the theater, and that is no different for your resume. Of course, when you're ready to submit, you want to have, everything in order and have a nice, clean, organized resume. But in general, the work on your resume never ends. It's an ever-changing document. It will change as you get more jobs. It will change as you maybe pivot careers or move up in your career. It's gonna change as your values, as your goals, as your mission changes, and that's okay. So that's why I say in resume writing, in acting, and theater, we value process over product. And as we're all very good at as theater majors, we get creative. With resumes, you can also get creative. I'm going to go through some templates today. You may have already done the black hole of looking into the Google search of how to write a resume. I like to say that templates are a starting point for where you want to go. They give you a little idea of what other people are doing, or of how to structure things or what to include, but they're not the be all end all. You want to take those as inspiration and then go off on your own and create an original resume that is catered towards you and what you do and what you're going for. Another way to get creative with resume writing is to free write. If you ever feel stuck and you don't know where to start, I like to say, just get it all down on paper. Write down all your experiences. Write it in paragraph form. Write it in list form. Write it however you want. It's helpful to just have something down on paper, and you can organize it later, or like meet with a career counselor and work on it with them to make it more organized. But just to get something out there, it's a good tactic. And another way to get creative is to collaborate with your friends. Peer review is really, really valuable, has benefited me greatly. And I encourage you all in this time while you're at school and in the lounge together or at Lane or anything like that to whip out your resumes and just get your peers' perspective on how you're coming across on paper. I'm sure you've heard this before, and it really, I want to emphasize this, is to be truthful on your resume. You never want to exaggerate or lie, of course, and just feel confident that no matter where you're at in your career, you have something to offer. You bring something that no one else can, and that's valuable, and employers value that. So as long as you know that about yourself and you reflect that accurately on your resume, employers will want to know more. So never feel like you need to exaggerate or lie about anything. You don't want to get stuck in the audition room or in an interview or getting the job and be a little lost on what you're supposed to be doing because you lied about something. So we want to make sure that we're staying away from that and being more truthful. So I feel like that goes without saying, but I just like to throw that in there. And as we'll talk about throughout this presentation, your main goal in writing this resume is to be concise and be organized and crafting a compelling story, your story of your experience, while keeping it relevant to what you're submitting for. And we're going to talk about how to make it as relevant as possible based on what you're submitting for. So I'm going to walk us through some resume essentials, basically breaking down the different sections within your resume and going through some of the details around that. If you have any questions as we go, like I said, feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. Ryan, if you see any questions, just let me know. But I'll also be addressing these in the template time as well. So the different resume essentials we're going to break down are overall content and formatting, the top section, experience categories, and education and skills. So we're going to start off with resume essentials, overall content and formatting. So with any resume, readability is the priority. Employers, casting directors are looking at these for maybe 30 seconds at most. So you want to make sure things are as scannable as possible and ready to be read at a moment's notice. Different ways that we can do this and sort of essentials around this section, around the overall aspect of it, is to keep your resume to one page. That is very important where we're at in our careers. When you're 10, 15 years down the line, you maybe have a 2-page resume, but at this point in our lives, all of us are going to have a 1-page resume. You can use 2 fonts, but I really recommend keeping to 1. If you do use 2, use it very sparingly, like maybe just your name or just the section titles, nothing too crazy. And your font should be no smaller than 10 points. So we don't want you trying to cram too much information on and making the font too small. And we'll talk about cramming information a little bit. But 10-point font is as low as you can go. I recommend 11. And of course, your section titles and your section titles will be larger than the content, and your name will be the largest of them all. And we'll talk about that more. Another readability point of advice is to keep it error-free, and this helps with the peer review helps with this. As well as looking it over yourself for proofreading, but you want to make sure your document is as error-free as can be. Sometimes that can make or break getting passed into the pile for an interview or an audition. And in terms of keeping it relevant, you want to modify based on what you're submitting for. So I recommend keeping a master resume of all your experiences, a Google Doc or a Word doc of, it could be 5 pages long, where you have all your theater credits, all of your past jobs or volunteer activities, so that you can reference that when you're trying to sub experiences in and out based on what you're applying for. So that's a way to help the fact that you're not cramming things in and you're really focusing your resume on what you're going in for. So for example, for an actor resume, I mostly do musical theater. So I have some musical theater credits and some film credits, but I have a lot of theater credits. And if I'm going in for a theater show, I'm probably not going to have room for my film credits because I want to capitalize on all the theater credits that I have. So I just recommend sort of having a master resume to reference when you needed to swap things in and out. On the other hand, on a film resume, I don't have as many film credits. So I'm going to highlight the film credits at the top, but then underneath it, I'll add some theater credits to fill the resume out. So that's a circumstance where I didn't have as much experience in the field, but I do have other relevant experience that I can incorporate and focus on. And we'll talk about that more as we get to the templates. I sort of already touched on this, but if that wasn't clear, you are going to have multiple resumes. As an actor, you could have multiple resumes: musical theater, film and TV, commercial, and a variety of other things as well. I have multiple theater resumes. I also have an advising resume. I have a teaching resume. It depends on what you're applying for, what direction you may go, but you will have multiple resumes. Don't try to just fit everything onto one resume, if that makes sense. Okay. The top section. So notice I'm calling this the top section, not the header. This is a important point I just want to touch upon. So a lot of people put the top section content, which we'll talk about, in a header format, like header footer format. I don't recommend this because for those of you applying through job sites or job portals, there's something called applicant tracking systems that have computers that read these resumes. And if you put something in a header, oftentimes it goes blank. So it never makes it to anyone's actual eyes because they can't see your contact info. So I recommend putting the header, the top section stuff in the body of the resume at the top, just not in an actual header, if that makes sense. So in terms of content for the top section, your name, as I said, should stand out above everything else. We want that to be the first thing and most prominent thing we see. So you can make that large, you can put it in all caps, you can put it in bold, however you want to make it stand out. And then underneath that, you want to include your contact information. Your phone and your email address are very important. Make sure you double check these and that they are accurate, because that's how they're going to call you in for that interview or that callback. And then some optional things to include in this section are your residence. For standard format resumes, which we'll talk about, you'll want to include a city and state. You don't need to include your full address, but a city and state is common practice. For actors, designers, directors, website is really helpful. When you have one, you'll probably make one senior year. Having your portfolio linked on your resume is helpful. On standard format resumes, especially for educators, administrators, for drama therapy, a LinkedIn can be very helpful. I encourage you all to get on LinkedIn and start exploring that. And I can talk about that with you guys further at another time, but that's something you can include on your resume. And if you don't know already, for actors, it's helpful to include some characteristics: your height, your hair, your eyes, your voice type if you're a singer. Those sort of things can be on the top section of your resume as an actor only. Okay, experience categories. So this is the meat of the resume, and these are the things that are going to change the most as you alter your resume per job. So you want to create categories that structure your resume in nice, clear sections so it's easily scannable, like I said. And you want to be consistent with the formatting within each section. So for theater resumes, columns are really important, and we'll look at this where you sort of structure things and you list your credits very systematically, and you want to make sure within each of these experience categories that it's structured similarly. And so, like I said, the categories will change based on what you're submitting for. So for actors, you may have categories like theater, film, TV, voiceover. And like I said, you prioritize what you're going in for. For theater would be the first section. Film and TV would be the first section for on-camera gig. But you can still include the others, but not focus on it as much. For directors, things like stage directing, film directing, acting experience is helpful, whatever fits your experience. If you're a director that has a lot of tech experience, by all means, you can include that below your directing experience. It's whatever sort of wherever you're at in your journey, in your career journey. For technicians, stage managers, designers, you can do things like lighting design, scenic design, stage management. You can include acting experience. It's not off limits by any means. But again, focusing on that main thing. So if I'm going in for a lighting design gig, I'm going to focus on that lighting design experience and maybe highlight some other technical skills. I don't know if there's any writers here, but similarly, you'll highlight your written and performed work section, and then maybe include awards, publications once you get there in your career. Directing is really helpful for writers, even acting. Nothing is off limits. You just want to make sure you're highlighting the most important thing, the thing that you're going in for, and then secondarily doing whatever reflects your experience best. And lastly, education and skills. So education is pretty basic. You're going to include your school name, your field of study, your degree type. So Gordon, Bachelor of Arts, Theater Arts, of course, and any double majors. Lists any intensives or workshops that you do throughout your college career are helpful to list if you have them. And then based on what theater art you are applying for, you could list relevant coursework. Relevant coursework is really helpful for technicians or directors, playwrights, things like that, just to see where you're at in your educational journey. For actors, techniques are really helpful to include. For any theater profession, names of instructors are helpful. Make sure you spell their names right, but it's really helpful to have some names on the resume because you never know who knows who, and it could be the reason you get called in. Someone could be a reference for you. So feel free to include instructors on your education section for theater resumes. And lastly, your skills section. This is a very exciting section to work on because it could really go in any different direction. But you want to focus on hard skills that are relevant to what you're submitting for or auditioning for. And what's really going to inform this section's in addition to experience categories, skills are really going to change based on what you're going in for. So if you see something in the job description that you have experience with, you're definitely going to want to take a look and pull from that job description and put it onto your resume if you possess those skills. If you see Microsoft Excel and you're a whiz at Microsoft Excel, throw that onto your skills section. In an audition notice, if you see they're looking for an advanced tap dancer and you've been taking tap for 15 years, put that in your skills section. So that's a way that you can sort of cater that section to what you're going in for. And just a little more specifically, actors, this section is going to be more special skills that you can utilize on stage. So think gymnastics, languages, dialects, instruments, anything that you feel could be useful on stage. And we'll talk about this more. For other theater professions, you're going to want to think hard skills like computer skills. Those are useful in any industry, in any role. Social media skills are helpful. Proficiencies in certain theater skills. So for example, a stage manager having proficiency in dance terminology and reading music, that's helpful to know. So that's something you could throw on your resume. Tech theater skills are also helpful. Show you're a well-rounded artist. If you have stage management experience or experience in the shop, you can totally include those on your skills section as well. And like I said before, with your overall resume, with your skills section, especially, you want to be honest. A lot of people tend to exaggerate here or, flub a little bit. You want to keep this as accurate as possible. You want to feel confident in the skills you're putting on this resume, on this skills section, because you never know when they're going to ask about them in an interview or ask you to actually do them on the spot and not in an audition. So you just want to make sure you're prepared for that. So be honest in this section, especially. And really briefly, I just want to go over this. I've mentioned this standard resume format and transferable skills I want to talk about. But a standard resume format essentially is going to be used for jobs outside of the theater. For example, day jobs, which we likely will all need at one point. For anyone thinking of pivoting careers, for me, I had like 2 sort of side careers going on, so I needed standard format resumes. This is also what you're going to use for you administrators, business, theater educators, drama therapy. This is the format you would use for those kind of jobs. So essentially, we're going to look at a template of this, but the resume essentials that we just discussed are the same, but your experience categories are going to look a little bit different. So there's going to be some logistics that you have to include for your experience, for your professional experiences that we'll look at on the template. And you're going to give more description about what you did in the job, what you accomplished, what skills you obtained in bullet format, which we're going to go over in a little bit, but just keep that in mind as we move forward. As I said, your focus for these bullet points, for these descriptions, will be on accomplishments and skills, not as much basic duties. We want to highlight the value that you added. And on these resumes, we want to emphasize transferable skills. And as theater artists, we have so many of them. And I have some examples, but I've been talking a little bit and I do want to hear from you guys. Do you guys have, if you need me to explain transferable skills, I'll explain that real quick. And then I want to hear from you what you think we as theater artists possess in terms of transferable skills. So transferable skills are essentially skills that we have as theater artists that we can bring to any work environment. And there are so many, and I just want to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on that. If you can think of any off the top of your head, I'd love to hear.
I mean, hopefully good time management and working together in a group well.
Yep, exactly. Those are 2 of the ones that I have down. Working together in a group, collaborating with people, that's one of the foundations of our work. And we are going to bring that to any work environment. You're always going to have to work on a team, communicate with supervisors, be flexible. All of those skills that you learn in collaboration, we will bring to the workplace. You also said time management. Exactly. You think about the winter productions we put on. We block a show, we tech it, we stage it, we perform it. and it's up in 2 weeks and it's closed in 3 weeks. That's the sort of fast-paced, good time management skills that we need to bring to any work environment. So great example, great example. Anyone else have anything else they want to throw in there?
I was gonna say like working under hard deadlines or like being like flexible under a moment's notice.
Exactly, exactly. Working on those tight deadlines. We encounter them all the time in theater, and will encounter them in the workplace as well. And you also touch on another point of like sort of acting on the fly, improvisation, being flexible. That's also a skill that we will take with us in the workplace, interacting with others, you know, getting called in for a meeting last minute, having to pitch someone on the elevator, all those circumstances we can draw from our theater skills on and communicate them on a resume. So great, thank you guys so much. I mean, I'll just brief through these. I mean, collaboration we discussed, improvisation we discussed, creativity and being inventive. That's another huge one. It's the foundation of our livelihood as theater artists, and employers are valuing that in this day and age. They're hungry for that creative talent in the workplace as things move more digitally. As there's a younger generation coming up, we want to be able to reach those people. So that creativity is so important and valued in the workplace, and something we can definitely highlight on the resume. Oh, I don't know why that's happening. Oh, there we go. Working on tight deadlines and in a fast-paced environment, like Rebecca said. Presentation, expert presenters, comfortable in front of a crowd for us actors. You'd be surprised in the workplace how many times your boss knows that you were a theater major and they'll say, can you do this presentation tomorrow? Just because they know you have the skills. So that is another really valuable thing that we bring. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. We could talk about this forever, but just know that as theater artists, we have valuable skills that can be transferred to workplaces in the industry, outside of the industry, whatever it may be. And when we talk about these skills on the resume, we want to show, not tell. What do I mean by that? So that means that we don't want to say on the resume, good collaborator, or creative, or works well in a fast-paced environment. We don't want to just outright say that on a cover letter or on a resume. This is a very common misconception. People put that in the skills section or put it on a cover letter. Basically anyone can write that, right? So how do we know, like, how do we sift through resumes and know like who actually has those skills? Well, we're going to highlight them in the actual content of the resume. In a standard format resume, we highlight them in bullet points in the description, like I was talking about. And I actually have an example of that on the next slide. So here's an example of a bullet point on a standard format resume. So I have collaborated with 10 marketing team members to successfully promote a fully sold out run of the spring musical. So essentially what I did here is I started with an action verb. So that's another thing we'll talk about on the template too. You start with action verbs in your bullet points just to sort of propel the sentence forward. So I chose collaborated because that's the skill that I'm highlighting. So collaborated with 10 marketing team members. So another thing we'll talk about is numeric value. On standard format resumes, it's very helpful to see numbers. People's eyes are just naturally drawn to numbers. So I included that I worked with 10 other team members in this collaborative process. And what was the result? Well, a fully sold out run of the spring musical. I'd say that's pretty great, right? So that's essentially what I did there. I highlighted the skill through telling the story of my experience with these 10 marketing members and the success that it had. And I forgot to mention this, but this would be for like, I'm thinking marketing assistant at Gordon College. Like if you were working in the theater department, helping to market the shows, this is some like a position you would include and a bullet you would include underneath. Does that make sense in terms of crafting these bullets in sort of a compelling way? We'll talk more in the template as well. Great, awesome. So now we're gonna move into template time, yay. But I just wanna stop sharing for a hot minute and just open it up and just see before we dive into the templates if anyone has any questions about that loads of information I just gave you. Yeah, go ahead, Kiana.
So I'm wondering, like you mentioned, we don't have probably too much experience to list right now on our resume. So what experiences should we include, like high school up, or like just general training throughout our lives, or like how would you handle that?
Absolutely. Great question. So this also touches on the point of process over product. The resume is an ever-changing document. So as you gain more experience, things might scoot off the resume. But right now, while you're in college, I keep saying where, I wish. While you're in college, you can absolutely still include some of your high school experiences, especially for performance resumes and theater resumes. Your high school experience is still valuable as you fill out your resume. So you can absolutely include that. Community theater, you can include that. If we're thinking about a standard format resume, it's you may not have professional experience, but maybe student jobs or extracurricular activities where maybe you have a leadership position, or maybe you're just a member. Volunteer work. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the templates, but all those things are things that you can use to fill your resume. I can't tell you how many times I've met with students that say they have no experience, and then after a quick half-hour session, we have a million things written out, and I say, come to me in another session with this out in a resume format, because we just went over so many things. So it just takes a little bit of brainstorming to find those things that you can include. But high school is fair game, extracurriculars are fair game, volunteer work's fair game. Definitely. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Could we include some like projects we did in the courses?
Absolutely. So projects are another way to fill out a resume, especially if they're relevant to what you are going for. So for example, if you're a playwright, absolutely you can include projects underneath as a section. Or if you're into tech theater, that's, if you're working on projects that wasn't a formal production, or worked on a really big class project, you can absolutely include that on your resume. And that could even spark a conversation in an interview where you could show them your portfolio or photos from that project. Does that make sense? Or is there a particular area that you're hoping to touch upon with projects?
Yeah. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So exactly, that's a great example. All things that you can use to fill out your resume while you're in school. And of course, it'll evolve and change as you gain more experience. Awesome. So I'm going to jump into the templates now. And after each template, if you have a question, if it relates to you as an artist, I'm happy to go further. So let me just actually pull up. Yeah, there we go. So can everyone see? Thumbs up. Okay. So I'm going to start with the actor resume. So fun. So this is a very basic template of an acting resume. As you can see, it's very clear, very structured and organized. I have my header, my top section with my name standing out above all else, my contact information, some of my characteristics. I have a little photo to the right. You can choose to include your headshot on your resume if you'd like. You do not have to, and only actors should do this. So any other theater profession or standard resume, we don't want to include our photo, but for our acting resume, it's fair game. And then in terms of the content, I'm assuming that I'm going in for a theater production, so I'm highlighting that theater section first and listing things out in a very clear format: name of show, tabbing over a bit, name of role, tabbing over a bit, company name / director name. Include them both, or just include company name, whatever you prefer to do. You can also separate director name in its own column, but I've chosen to sort of include it with company name here. It's personal preference. And then I have a film section because I have a little more room on my resume. I want to fill it out a little bit. I'm including maybe some of those student films I did at Gordon. So I have the name of the film. For film and TV stuff, it's a little technical and I won't get too much into it, but you're going to do a type of role. So for film, it's like supporting, lead, cameo. For TV, it's guest star, co-star. It's very specific. You can sort of Google that stuff when the time comes, but just know that that looks a little bit different than listing the actual name of the role. And then production company, director name, very standard, but all aligned similarly across sections, as you can see. And then the education and training section, I have my degree, And on this resume, I chose to sort of list out my training per like type of training. So acting, voice and speech, movement, dance. And within each section, I have the name of the professor, the technique I studied. You can include just the name of the professor or just the technique, whatever your personal preferences or level of experience is, but it's just helpful information to include. And if you happen to be a dancer, you can include the name of the studio you studied at. You can absolutely include the name of the instructors. And you also should definitely include the name of the number of years you studied the dance. That's just helpful for people to know. And then lastly, the special skills section. So like I said, dialects, languages, impressions, advanced dancing and vocal abilities. People put like certifications, like fitness certifications and things like that. Stage combat, sports, or a conversation starter. I know people that put something like can do the ABCs backwards. It's just a helpful thing to include on your resume that maybe they'll ask about and you can do in the audition and helps them remember you. So that's sort of some specifics around what to include in special skills. So that's the general, very basic overview of an acting resume. Does anyone have any questions about the acting resume before I dive into tech and design and stage manager? Okay, no problem. And we can also ask them at the end. So for the tech design stage manager resume, I chose stage manager. Again, top section, highlighting the name, putting contact info. I'm highlighting my stage management experience first and foremost, formatted similarly to my acting experience, name of show, type of role I had, so production stage manager or assistant stage manager, company name, director name. Helpful note for assistants, assistant stage manager, assistant designer. Instead of director name, it may be more helpful to include who you worked under, so the production stage manager or the head designer, whatever it may be. And then this section, like I said, will alter based on your experience or your interests, but I just made it general additional theater experience, and I included the different tech experience I had. So production manager, production assistant, props assistant, light board op. I figured that information is really relevant for a stage manager. It's all people they'll be communicating with, things they'll be working with. But if you don't have any other tech experience and you want to include your acting experience, feel free to do so, or directing, or anything you want. Just as long as it's formatted clearly and organized well. And then your education section is, this is just another way to pare it down, but I have my degree. It's helpful to put when you're graduating. While you're in school, when you're out of school, you can take off the years. And then some theater coursework. I thought it might be helpful for them to see what types of courses I've taken specifically around tech production. I know you guys have a tech course here at Gordon or two. So it's helpful to get a little specific on what you studied in that course. So I put set building, lighting installation, house management, things like that. And then I also highlighted some other theater experience I have: directing, acting Shakespeare, musical theater. All of those things are helpful to know for employers that I've taken those things, so I have a basic understanding that I bring to the rehearsal room. And then skills. For stage managers, things like safety training, certifications, tech theater, computer skills, proficiencies like dance terminology and reading music, all those things, those are things that I mentioned before, helpful to include on your resume, especially for stage management. I would say like safety training things and tech theater skills and computer skills like graphic design and social media, all that stuff, really helpful. Really briefly, a directing resume. I know we have some directors here. Again, pretty much similar formatting, just highlighting my directing experience, name of show, director, company name. If I was an assistant director, I'd note that and put the director name that I'm working under as a part of my the company name. And then on this resume, I chose to highlight acting experience, name of show, name of role, company name, formatted similarly to the top section. But again, this section will change based on your level of experience and what you want to highlight. And then this was just another way to format this education section. I put it in as highlighting my directing coursework first with the names of professors that I've worked with. And then I highlighted my acting experience, highlighting the names of professors and specifically the techniques I focused on that maybe I can bring into the rehearsal room. And then it can never hurt to throw in some tech theater and design skills that you may have. As you communicate, as a director, you're going to communicate with multiple different creative team members. And then skills, like I said, you'll see in job descriptions and notices that inform this section, but performance skills and proficiencies are helpful for a director to have, such as well-versed in Shakespearean text if you're directing a Shakespeare show, reading music, dance terminology, tech theater skills, all those kind of fun things, whatever you wanna highlight. But something I didn't mention that I just wanted to note is in terms of order on your resume, you can start with the credits that are most relevant to what you're going in for. So if I'm going in for a Shakespeare show, I'll throw my Shakespeare stuff towards the top of my resume and still include my musical theater stuff, but maybe a little bit lower. So if you're wondering about structure of where to put things, that's a way that you can do it. Another way is by like reputation of company, which you don't have to worry as much about right now, but maybe down the line, that's something to think about. And just really briefly, because I want to get to questions, this is an example of a standard format resume that I spoke about for you administrators, therapists, educators, or career pivoters, or day jobbers, all the things. This is like your classic resume, but essentially top section, very similar, but I included city and state. While you're in college, education section can be first, just to highlight what you're currently working towards, but you can move that right above the skills section once you graduate. And you're just going to include, you know, again, your name and degree. You can also include honors and relevant coursework in this section. And relevant coursework could be some gen ed, thematic course stuff that you take that may be more relevant to the job than maybe some of your theater coursework. It's just an option to list some things. And then this work experience section, like I mentioned before, looks a little bit different, of course. You have your company name and city and state. That's just a logistical thing you need to put, as well as when you started, month and year, and when you ended the month and year, along with your position name. So you can format these however you want. Just make sure that it's all on there in a nice, clear way. And then you're going to include 2 to 6 bullets about your role at this company. So, or at this volunteer activity or project, and highlight them in a similar format to that bullet point I went over in the presentation. Starting with action verbs, highlighting accomplishments, showing value and results, those kind of things. And then this is getting at the filling the resume. The next section, you can include any other experience you have, projects, volunteer work, extracurricular activities, theater experience, if you feel like it's relevant to what you're submitting for. You can include that all in this next section. You can format it the same as the section above, or just sort of maybe make it in a more list or column format, whatever you need to do to get the information on there in a clear way. And then the skills are pretty much the same, relevant to what you're submitting for, nice hard skills, computer, languages, social media, certifications, things like that. You'll see in the job description what you can maybe include. So that is the templates. Really, I know I blew through those, but I'm sure there are questions that came up through all that, and I'm happy to answer them now. And I can pull them up too to show you further if you need to again.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, I was kind of looking at not so much like the theater resume, but like the college student type resume. Does it
Yes.
Does it matter if you do like chronological order of your jobs, or does it depend on like what kind of position you have, if you want to put that first versus like what you're currently doing?
Great question. I'm really glad you brought this up. Yeah, so essentially on our standard format resumes, we want to do, it's called a reverse chronological order. So your most recent experience to your least recent. In general, that's kind of what we aim for. Now, if you have a job that you did like 2 years ago that is much more relevant than your current role, there's a way around this. So you can choose to create your top section, not top section, in the experience section, the first section you have, you can choose to highlight a section called relevant experience. This is a great way to highlight the things that are more important, where you can put those 1 or 2 experiences you have that are directly related to the job and then do an other experience section where maybe you list out some of those other things. Now, within these sections, you still want to do reverse chronological, but that's just a way around, like, if the experience is a little older, but you want to highlight it, pushing it up towards the top. But in general, you want to stick to reverse chronological as much as possible. And even the jobs that aren't as relevant to what you're submitting for, you can cater those bullets towards the skills that you see in the job description. You can cater those bullets and try to mold them as best as possible towards what you're applying for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Great question. And I also, if you have, continue to ask questions, but I also, if anyone wanted to feel brave and pull up their resume, I'm happy to take a look at it now. We can all learn together.
So I have a question.
Yes, Arabella.
Yeah, so just like you said, for the standard resume, we include the time the month and year you started and ended, but I find that then you didn't include it in other resumes. So does it matter, or is that? Yeah.
That's a great question. For theater resumes, you can include the year that you did this certain production. You can make that a column. Some people, like in directing and technical theater, like choose to do that. You can sort of list that out as its own column. I don't think it's necessary. I don't fully recommend it, because sometimes, especially for artists, there may be gaps in your career. Like there may be a whole year before you do a show as an actor. So I think it's helpful to just like not include it. But if you feel like for your own personal preference that you'd like to include that on your theater resume, you absolutely can. But I generally lean towards not including it personally. But it is an option. But definitely on your standard format resume, they like to see it. It's sort of a formality thing. Sometimes they check in on from your former employers, like when you worked. It's kind of like a formality thing, if that makes sense. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have another question.
Absolutely.
So for this, stage manager resume, you mentioned that if we are the assistant stage manager, we will maybe include the stage manager's name, will be more useful than include the director's name. So do we need to like clarify the name is the stage manager's name or is the name of the director?
Yes, so that's a great question. So I would specify. What I would recommend is putting, like for director, you can put, so if the company name, comma, DIR, you can DIR dot, like kind of like abbreviate it and then put their name. If it's an SM, you can put, I would put like Ryan Canister parentheses SM. Does that make sense? So they know that was who you're working under and what their title was. So I would try to indicate it in some kind of way, and just be consistent with how you indicate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, really
Great.
helpful.
Awesome. Anyone else have any other questions or want to pull up their resume? I also have a little activity too, if you guys don't want to show us your resume. No problem. This will be fun. I have a little activity for us that also requires some of your participation. Okay, so this is a poorly constructed resume. And based on what we talked about today, I want to get your feedback on how I can improve this Jane Doe's resume.
Her name is too small.
Yep, first and foremost, we want to make that stand out above everything else, like I said. So I'm going to pop it up some point sizes and put it in bold. Good point.
Maybe only use one size font. I mean, not one size font, but one type of font.
Yes, I'm glad you caught that. Yes, good. Perfect. So we want to keep it all nice and clean. One font. It was supposed to be rubato, right? We'll make it, there we go. Okay. And you said size too, right? So we'll have to knock this down. Okay, now what? What else we got?
I would bold each section for theater, film, education, training.
Yes, we want to make it nice and clear and readable as possible. So we have to break down these sections in very clear format. They can't blend into the rest of the resume. We want it to be nice and organized. So I'm going to bold and underline them. What else?
The columns and the formatting aren't lined up or anything.
Yes. So I'm going to tab these over. I want to make everything nice and aligned so that someone can scan this in 30 seconds, right? 30-second rule. What else? So that looks nice and clean now. I think the spacing is a little off here, right? This like, that's another thing. Okay. What else in this bottom section do we see?
It might be helpful to like list how long you have been dancing in different types of dance.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to get more specific. So right now I just have classes, right? So what if I did like acting? I did Shakespeare. I took advanced acting. I could do voice and speech separately. I can do movement separately and include, voice and speech. Paul, I don't know if you guys have taken this class yet, but Paul D'Agostino, Linklater, right? That's a name of professor, a technique. Acting, I took with Norman Jones. I took Shakespeare with him, right? We want to get specific about that. Yeah, so essentially, I mean, we didn't flesh out that section as much, but that's the sort of what we're going for. A good point. And what about special skills? What have we seen here that we can fix up? So I have many different dialects, impressions, advanced dancer, and tech theater skills. What do we think about that?
You could get more specific with like the dialects and like how long you've been dancing and what kind of skills you got.
Yes, exactly. We want to get a little more specific with everything. What kind of dialects, what kind of dances, we would do like that kind of thing. What kind of tech theater skills, those kind of things. We want to get as specific as possible so that we're not leaving anyone with any questions. And if we are, it's something that we can speak more to and even more specifically about. So great job. So I can't type fast enough to get it all out there, but we hit all the main points I wanted to in fixing up this resume. And when you guys look at each other's resumes, those are things to look out for and help your peers with for sure. So yeah, so any other burning questions? And I know Ryan also has a question as well, but I want to see if you guys have any other questions about resumes that I can speak to. And you guys already have asked some really good ones, so thank you. All right, Ryan, we'll take your question.
Sure. Yeah, so the big question that we're asking this summer, sort of our theme, is what is the role of art in the new normal as more things start to open up, as we slowly get back to some semblance of normal. Yeah, what do you think the role of art will be? And it can be very general, it can be specific to theater productions. But yeah, what do you think the role is as we sort of enter this new phase?
It's a great question. And yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting time to be transitioning back to everything. And I think that, I think something I reflected upon a lot this year and I really struggled with in the beginning of the pandemic was the fact that this word essential worker was going around. And of course, our profession came to a halt because, what we were doing could definitely wait. We needed to stay safe and our essential workers were out there serving our communities. But I did struggle with this thought of like, well, my livelihood isn't essential. Like, how do I wrestle with this? And then I thought about it. And I took a different perspective. I was like, well, what is essential to me right now? Well, I'm turning to TV. I'm turning to movies, right? That's essential. That got me through this pandemic. Turning to my theater community, my theater friends, that was essential to me. So in a way, I started taking a different perspective. Like, okay, like what we do is essential. It's just we can't be out there right now, right? And now that we're transitioning to this new time, things are getting better, things are opening back up, theater is coming back, which is really exciting. I think that our essential work is ready to enter back into our communities. We are essential workers as artists, especially during this time. We in the theater bring people together. We show our humanity and put it on display, and that heals people, and that starts conversations, and that brings people together in a way that hasn't happened for a very long time. So I think we have some really essential work in moving forward, which I'm really excited about, and I think is really important as we head into this transition, that we keep in mind that our work is really important, and we have a community now to bring together, and we have the power to do that through the art that we create. So that's my answer to your great question.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Michael, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you after this workshop to maybe either set up some more one-on-one coaching, or if there's a question or two that they might want to ask, they think of something later on, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Thank you. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to put in the chat, I have my email address, my website, my LinkedIn page, and my Instagram handle. So honestly, open invite. Feel free at any time. Shoot me an email. There's also like a messaging thing on my website. You can message me on there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Instagram, and DM me a question if you ever have one. I'm open and available to supporting you guys in your career journey. I know it can't be easy, and I know how hard it can be and how many questions arise, and I'm always here to support you. If you ever have just a quick question, you can always email me or DM me. I'm happy to answer. If you ever want to sit down for a one-on-one session, I also do coachings, resume review, and career counseling, and all of those fun things. And I'm happy to do that at any time. Just email me. Email request me for that, and I'm happy to set up a. I mean, Zoom is so great now. We can do it anywhere. So I'm happy to go over your resume more specifically as you go along, or help you through a job application, or be another pair of eyes on whatever you need at any time. So definitely take down my contact info, and I hope to continue the conversation. I'm happy to support you in any way I can. Thanks for opening that invite, Ryan.
Awesome. Anytime. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Michael, any final words? Anything coming up that we should know about?
Nothing performance-wise right now. Hopefully soon. Yes, thank you, Kiana. Thank you. I just want to say thank you all for being here. I know it's a summer night, and it's hard to be on Zoom after a year and a half on Zoom, but I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me and work on your career development. It's so important, and I can't stress enough to be thinking about this stuff while you're in school. I know it can sort of feel like something you can put off until later on, but it's helpful to be thinking about it all throughout, so you can continue to cultivate your skills while you're in school and have stuff to throw on that resume. And of course, there are people here to support you in that journey, but I just want to encourage you to be thinking about that as you go along, and be in touch with me. And I look forward to more conversations with you all, and I'll stick around afterwards if anyone wants to talk one-on-one or has a quick question. I'm happy to do that. But thank you all for being here.